for handing out the... So we're going to continue tonight with Maseches Tamid, where if you're using the art scroll that we passed around, we're on Lamed Amud Beis. Lamed Amud Beis, we're I'd say about halfway down. If you look at where it says, it looks like a Tosos there, Lo Hayu Kosin Es Etzleh. So about 5 lines beneath that, it says Miyaricho. The last 2 words on the line is Miyaricho. Okay, and then if you're using the back, again, not all the way in the back because we're not in Midos, but if you're using the back of the elucidated in Tamid, it's 30b2. 30b2. So let's see. We had just said that they wouldn't shech the Tamid until the Kohen had opened the doors of the Heichal. In between the Ulam, the antechamber, and the Heichal, the Kodesh section, there was a very large gate. And we talked about last night how he kind of went in through a door on the side. It involved sticking his arm in until his armpit, and there was a key latch in there. And then once he got, there was a tah, that was a cell, that corridor that ran after the wall of the Beis Hamikdash. He would make an immediate left, another door, he would unlock it, and then he'd be in the Kodesh section. Once he was inside the Kodesh section, he went to the shar, to the gate, he unbolted it from the inside and opened it. And it wasn't until they heard the noise of that door opening, the gate opening, that's when the Kohanim started the process with the Tamid to shech the Tamid. Now the Gemara continues and it says something mystical occurred. Most of the Mefarshim say this was above the laws of nature, what we're going to be seeing now. Yericho, all the way in Yericho. So Yericho was miles from Yerushalayim, but Yericho, Ayushomin Kol Shar Godol Sheniftach. That there was this mystical connection. A lot of the Mefarshim explain, since Yericho was the first town in Israel that was conquered by Yoshua, it was almost seen as being like the opening. That was where the Jewish people started their victory of taking the land of Eretz Yisrael. So there's this connection between Yericho and Yerushalayim. And we're going to see in the Gemara now that many connections existed. Again, most of the commentaries say this was above the laws of nature. It says, Yericho hayushomin kol shar gadol sheniftach. In Yericho, they were able to hear the sound of the opening. When the Beis Hamikdash would get rolling in the morning and they would open that gate, the Kohanim heard the noise in the Beis Hamikdash to start shechting the Tamid, but in Yericho, that noise could be heard as well. Again, in the city of Yerushalayim, he may not have heard that, but something that was like amplified. What happened in the Beis Hamikdash, somehow or another, was sensed in Yericho as well. Now it continues, Yericho hayeshomin kol magrefa. Not only that, but in Yericho, they would hear the sound of the magrefa. Magrefa literally means a shovel, but it was one of the instruments that the Levium played in the orchestra that took place in the Beis Hamikdash. Again, because of its shape, it was referred to as the shovel. We can only imagine what this instrument looked like, probably almost like a guitar of some sorts. But that was the story. It says, again, when the Levium would play it in the Beis Hamikdash, again, you could hear echoes of it in Yericho. Mishnah continues, Miricho Yeshom Kol Ben Arza, Makish Batzilzo. They would also hear in Yericho the sound of Ben Arza banging the cymbals. He was the one who gave the sign to the orchestra when it was time to strike up the band, and he did it by clapping the cymbals together. And his name was Ben Arza. He was the famous conductor of the orchestra, and I guess every conductor who took it over after him, he kind of inherited that name. Oh, you're the Ben Arza. You're the Ben Arza. The original one was named like the Ben Arza, but everyone carried that title after that. So that striking up the orchestra by hitting the cymbals, that noise was also heard in Yericho. Then it says, Miricho Yishom Kol Cholil. They could even hear the sound of the flute. That was one of the important instruments that was played by the orchestra in the Beis Hamikdash. Again, why just that instrument as opposed to so many of the others? I don't know. I'm sure the Mefarshim here explained this is a lot of agarata. But again, most everyone is learning that this was above the laws of nature. There's no reason why these sounds should have been heard all the way in Yericho. Mishnah now says, Miricho Yeshom Kol Givine Karuz. They would also hear the sound of Givini, who was the crier, meaning he was the one. Givini was the original crier, and I guess they gave that title to all those who came after him. He was the one who summoned all the Kohanim. It's time to get moving, time to get on the job. They heard that. You could hear that sound in Yericho as well. Yericho Ayishom Kol Ha'etz She'asa Ben Katan Muchani Lakior. In Yericho, they could also hear the cranking of the wheels. Remember, we spoke about this earlier, is that the Kohen whose job it was to do Trumas Hadeshen, before ascending the Mizbeach, before ascending the ramp to the Mizbeach, he had to be matar his hands and feet in the kiyar, the laver. And again, the labor overnight, we said there was a great chacham by the name of, this is, it was Ben Katin, who came up with a chap that instead of having to spill out the water every morning from the kiyar, which you would have because it was linite, it stayed in a vessel in the Beis Hamikdash overnight. What he did was he dug a well and he had a pulley system that every night the kiyar was lowered into the ground, into the wellspring in the ground. So it was connected with the water, the subterranean waters. Therefore, it wasn't considered lina. It wasn't considered that it had sat in the kiyar overnight. Therefore, the water did not need to be spilled out. So the Kohen in the morning, he would have to use the pulley system, this mechanism that Ben Katan had created to raise the kiyar again. And we said the other Kohanim would hear that, and that's how they knew that he arrived at his destination, because it was still dark when he did this. But he says that noise of the pulley system lifting the kiyar from the ground, that said that the Kohen who's going to do the Trumas Hadeshen is well on his way to getting the task done. They were able to hear that in Yericho as well. Now he says, Mi Yericho hayeshovea kol shofar. In Yericho, they could also hear the sound of the shofar, that every day in the morning and the afternoon when they brought the Korban Tamid, it was accompanied by the blasting of the shofar in the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't just on Rosh Hashanah. They blasted the shofar with the Tamid being brought as well. So they could hear that shofar blast in Yericho as well. The Shoshu Maskir as Hashem b'Yom Kippurim. And they also, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Some say that they were even able to hear the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur when he uttered the special name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was reserved for that occasion. They were able to hear that in Yericho as well. So there's like this connection, this special connection that exists between the Beis Hamikdash and Yericho. It continues now. You could catch a whiff if you were in Yericho. You could catch a whiff of the Ketores that was burning every day in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Mizbeach Hazav, on the inner Mizbeach, they burnt Ketores. And in Yericho, you could catch a sniff of that. Again, this connection that was existing, it was almost like you could tap into the Beis Hamikdash in Yericho. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Diglai, and finally he teaches, my father had goats on the mountains of Michvar. Many Mefarshim say that was in the region of Yericho. And they would start to sneeze because of the smell of the pitum. So it wasn't just humans that were able to tap into this, even animals. So he's saying that his father was a goat herder and he had animals in that region. And they would start sneezing. I guess the fragrant scents of the incense would get in their nostrils. So it was just absolutely amazing, this mystical connection that existed between the Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim and between Yericho. What I'm struck about this is that if you remember, Yericho was supposed to be laid waste and not rebuilt. So it's like there's this special connection that exists between Beis Hamikdash and Yericho, which was a place that was just laying in ruins. It wasn't that there were people there enjoying it. So yes. Yeah, but when? Yeah, but I'm saying, is this what? So I'm wondering, is this what the Mishnah is referring to? Or is prior to him? I'm assuming in the Shlomo Melech days, when Klal Yisrael was at its best, and and he built the first Beis Hamikdash and whatnot. I would assume all these connections existed. Yeah. So that's what I'm wondering. So it's just like amazing. However, we understand this connection, that the connection, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw some reason for this connection to exist in a place that was supposed to desolate. Again, you're right that later when someone did something wrong and rebuilt there, but it's just, again, I don't understand. I'd have to look more into the Mefarshim, why they explain this. What's the reason? Why did this? I'm not 100% sure. I didn't have a chance to look it up, but it's again, from what I could tell, most of the commentaries learned that this is Lamala Min HaTava. This was supernatural. There's no reason why these sounds should have been heard, and certainly not why the smells should have been reaching there. All right, let's continue. So now the Mishnah says, now that that was a little bit of a tangent, the Mishnah continues and it says as follows. Misha Zacha b'Tamid. So the Kohen who won the right, remember, because we said there was a lotteries that were drawn. So the Kohen who won the right to shech the Tamid, Moshcha v'holech lebeis hamitbachayim. He would pull it, in other words, he would drag it, it was kind of on a rope, and he would drag it along until he got to the slaughtering area. We'll look at the map soon. We'll show you where that is. Misha Zacha be'Evarim, and all the Kohanim who run the rights to take its limbs after it would be butchered and cut into pieces. We said different Kohanim got the rights to take the parts of the Tamid and bring it up onto the ramp. So it says, Misha Zachu Bevarim, the Kohanim who won those rights, Holchanimo, they would accompany the Kohen who was schlepping the Tamid who was going to shecht it. Now it tells us, where was this location? Where did the butchering take place? Beis Hamikdash, the slaughter area was north of the Mizbeach. So let's just pause before we go further. Just if you look at that map, again, in every Gemara there should be a map. So you see the Mizbeach in the ramp is 26, 27. So just north of that, which would mean to the right of it, you'll see there it says number 25 is Tabaos. That means rings. And we'll see that soon in the next parak. That how did they hold the animal while it was being shechted? There was a series of rings that were attached to the floor in the Beis Hamikdash. They would almost harness the animal with those rings, put around its neck so it wouldn't be flopping around, and it would stabilize it, and that's where they would shecht it. And then if you see number 24, that says shulchanos. That's what you're going to see soon. The Mishnah is going to talk about. There were tables. That's where they actually started to cut it up. And then you see 23 says nanasim. There was like little pillars. That's what's going to be talked about right now. So just to understand, we're talking about the area north of the Mizbeach, means if you're looking at that map, which is a bird's eye view, it would be to the right of the Mizbeach there. So it says as follows. It says, the area where they slaughtered it was north of the Mizbeach. And in that area, Shmona Amudim Nanasim. There were 8 pillars that were known as Nanasim. A Nanas is a dwarf. So there was 8 pillars, meaning don't think that there were these high columns. They were short. They were like the height of a human being. And there was hooks on them. They would put the hind legs of the shechted animal after it had been slaughtered. It would hang there upside down. And that's where they would start to butcher it, cut out the kishkas, and they would skin it and everything from there. So that's what he's going to say now. He says there was these 8 nanasim, these 8 dwarf pillars. Urivim shel erez gabeim. There were square pieces of cedar wood on top of them. V'unklo shel barzel ayikoven behen shloshes sedarim l'chol echad echad. And there was in those because again the pillar was made out of stone. On top of it was, on top of the pillar, harnessed onto the top, was this big cedar block, and set into those cedar blocks was a series of hooks. And what did they do with those hooks? Sheben Tolin, with those hooks, that's where they would hang, umafshitin, and they would skin the animal. In other words, they had it hanging from the ankles on its hind legs. And again, that's also where they would gut it, take out the kishkas, whatnot, and they'd start working its way down, pulling down the hide from it. Mafshitin al shulchano shel shayish sheben amudim. And in between those pillars, there were tables made out of marble. Because again, these pillars were not all that tall. So they didn't want the animals, once they start skinning it and butchering it, that some of it should be on the floor. That's disrespectful. So there was these marble tables. Mefarshim explained they were marble and not metal. Because again, they were directly under the sun. If they were metal, they'd conduct heat. They'd start cooking the animal perhaps on a really hot day. We didn't want anything to happen until it got up onto the Mizbeach. So they were made out of marble to keep it somewhat cool in the sun. And then, so the animals, their feet would be hanging on those hooks, but they would be draped over the table, and that's how they'd be doing it. They'd be butchering them, and again, it's slaughtered already. This is after it's slaughtered. They'd be pulling it down to strip the hide off of it. Let's just continue. The Mishnah continues, and it says, the Kohen who won the rights or the privilege to clean off the inner mizbech, the golden mizbech that had the residue from the ashes from the ketoris from the previous day, nichnas, he walked into the kodesh, because remember the kodesh is now unlocked. And since the Tamid has been shachted, so now it was like clockwork. The next coin gets to his station, which was going in there. He took that golden basket with him. He put it in, so he walked in carrying it in front of himself. He would use his hands, not a broom. He would use his hands on the top of the golden mizbeach to scoop up all the ashes from yesterday's ketores. And he would put those ashes into the golden basket. After he got whatever he would scoop up with his hands, he would use his hands to now make a pile in the middle of the mizbeach. And he would sweep everything into the basket. And then he would put the basket down on the ground and leave. He would not take the basket out yet. Why? Because the next Kohen had to come in to clean out the menorah. And the residue of the Mizbeach Azav, the golden Mizbeach, they were meant to be taken out at the same time. But only one of them worked at a time. So first the Kohen went in whose job it was to take care of cleaning off the golden Mizbeach. When he's done, and all the ashes are in that golden basket, he puts it down on the floor near the Mizbeach, the golden Mizbeach. He leaves, the next Kohen comes in, whose job it's going to be to clean out the menorah. Tomorrow night, that's where we'll start. We're talking about a very, very unique way how the menorah was cleaned, how that process looked like. and then after that, what they did with those ashes. Oh, why did he use his hands? Very good. It was a way of showing covet. It was no longer hot. Those ashes were already cold, but it was a way of showing covet. I'm not scared to get my hands dirty. It's a covet. This is something which was used on the altar. I don't want to. So it's like, oh, it's disgusting to me. I'm going to use a broom. I'm going to use my hands in a covetic way, in a respectful manner of that fashion. Excellent question. All right, we'll pause here. We'll continue tomorrow night. We'll recite a Kaddish Rabbanan. Rabbi Chanani ben Akasha Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakas Es Yisrael Levikach Yerbalam Torah Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chafetz L'man Tzidko Yagil Torah V'Yadir. Amen.